It can be quite intimidating opening and editing software for the very first time. But by the end of this video, you'll know the ins and outs of Premiere Pro. Hi, my name is Maya, and in this video from HubHub, I'm going to guide you through the basics of Premiere Pro, showing you how to start your very first edit. We're going to cover everything from starting your very first timeline to editing and finally exporting. Let's get into it. So before we open Premiere, I'm going to show you the basic file structure that we use. And you'll be able to download this file structure together with this video. In this file structure, you can find a folder called footage. If you open this folder, you can find raw footage as a subfolder. In here, we want to put all the footage that we're going to use for today's project. Make sure you always collect all your footage and put it in this folder. You also have a folder for audio if you have any music, voiceover, or sound effects that you can add here. All right, here we have it, Premiere Pro. So the first thing that you want to do is to press New Project, which is the blue button in the top left corner. You're then met with this Import tab. First thing that you want to do is to name your project. I'm going to name it Tutorial Hub Hub. The second thing that you want to do is to find a project location. And something that's really good is that we already have our file structure. And in our file structure, we have a folder where we put the Premiere file. That means that you have all the footage, all the audio, and the Premiere file all in the same place. The next thing we're going to do is to import some footage. On the left-hand side, you can see all the locations in your computer and any SSDs or hard drives that you may have plugged in. I'm going to click the red one, find our editing file structure, go to footage, and then raw footage. What you can do is to double-click so you see all of the clips here. But I'm going to go back on footage and just mark the entire box because I want to import everything that's in that folder. If you have any audio or anything else, you can import that here too. Premiere also has a function where it automatically creates a new sequence for you if you want to. You can see that in the top right corner. I'm going to deselect that for now because I'm going to show you how to actually create a sequence once we're in the Premiere. And then we click Create. So as you can see, we now have reached the Edit tab. Before we were on the Import tab, now we're on the Edit tab here in the middle. So, as I said in the intro, it can be a little bit daunting the first time you enter Premiere Pro. There's a lot of buttons and there's a lot of different tabs, but we're going to go through it all. The first thing to know is that each of these tabs have a different function. If you double click on a footage, we can see it in the source monitor. The source monitor is basically where we play the footage back. Premiere Pro have a few different presets that you can pick depending on what you're going to do when you're editing. Let's have a look. If you click on Window and you go down to Workspaces, here you can see some few different options. We are currently on Editing. You can also go to Assembly, and then you see a slightly different layout. So if, for example, when you're going to edit audio, you want to be in the Audio workspace. When you're going to do color grading, you want to be in the color grading workspace, but I'll show you a little bit more about that later. For now, let's stick to the editing one. At the bottom right, we have our timeline section, which we're going to get to in a little bit when we start editing. When we have media in here, the footage will also pop up in the program section, but we'll see that in a second. If we have a look at our project tab, it looks a little bit messy. The best thing to start with is to create some bins. There's a couple ways to do this. You can right click and click New Bin. I'm going to name this raw footage, Shift, click to highlight all of them, and I'm going to drag and drop them into the raw footage folder. Another way to create a bin is to click Command B or Control B. B for bin, and I'm going to name this Sequence. And you can create more folders if you want one for audio, if you want one for assets, or if you want one for anything else that you might put in there. But we're going to stick to these two for now. So there are two ways of creating a sequence. The first way is actually a way that Premiere tells you. So if you look down in the bottom right corner, it says drop media here to create a sequence. So that is exactly what we're going to do. I'll grab a piece of footage from my raw footage folder in my projects tab. I click it, I drag it, and I drop it. One thing that's really good to know about this is that the sequence takes the same settings as the clip. So if this clip is shot in 25 frames per second in 4K, then the sequence will also have that same settings. Make sure that you drag and drop your sequence into your sequence bin. Another way to create a sequence is to click this little button right here, New Item. We click this and we click Sequence. We have a few different presets here, Premiere is really, really helpful in the way that they give you a lot of different options every time you need to do something new. So we can pick this preset here. It's digital SLR, 1080p, 25 frames per second. If you want to change anything in your sequence, you can go to settings and everything is adjustable. Say, for example, that you want to do a sequence for Instagram Reels. Instead of having a horizontal video, you need a vertical one. So let's create that sequence. We want our aspect ratio to be 1080 by 1920. So 9 by 16 instead of 16 by 9. I'm going to name this sequence hub reels underscore v1. The reason why I name it v1 is because it means that it's version 1. And I'm going to drag this into the sequence. So I'm going to name this sequence as well. I'm going to name it hub, and I'm going to name it 1920 by 1080, which is the aspect ratio, underscore v1. I strongly recommend to name your sequences v1 and then v2 when you duplicate, and v3 and so forth. Don't name a sequence final, because it's never going to be the final one, I swear. So here you can see the hub 1920 by 1080, which is the horizontal version. And if we click the Reels version, and I pull in the footage there as well, it comes up with a little warning tab. It says this clip does not match the sequence setting. Change sequence setting to match the clip settings. I'm going to click Keep Existing Settings because I chose the settings how I wanted them to be. And then you can see here that the box is in Reels format, but the footage is in its original format. The way I imported this footage into the timeline was simply just selecting it, dragging it, and dropping it. There are a few other ways to do this as well. Let's have a look at this sequence, the horizontal one. If I double click on a clip, you can see it here in the source monitor. The source monitor is linked to the footage that you have in your projects tab, so all the raw footage. Whereas the program monitor on your right is linked to your timeline, which is where you're editing. If we look at our project tab, let's select another piece of footage that we want to drag into our timeline. We can use our mouse to scrub the footage back and forth. If we find a section that we like, let's say here when she's moving her hands like that, I can press I for in, scrub my mouse a little bit further to the end, and O for out. I have now made in and out points. That basically means I've selected this part of the footage, and if I click on the footage and I drag and drop it into the timeline, only the selected part will come down into my timeline, which you can see here. Another way you can do this is to click this little button here called Insert. Make sure that you know where your playhead is in the timeline, because the clip is going to end up where you have the playhead. I'm going to press Command Z to reverse that. Click so my playhead is further up where there's no other clips. Go back to my source monitor and click the Insert tab. There you have it. Let's have a bit of a deep dive into the timeline. Good thing to know is that you can always make any of these boxes bigger or smaller if you can't see properly. So I'm gonna make this a bit bigger. Everything else moves out of the way. If you want to make the actual clips bigger, so you see them a little bit more, you can press the plus signs on your computer and you zoom in. You can also extend the bars of the tracks like this, and then you press minus again for zooming out. And you can play around a lot in your timeline. You can click the clips, you can move them around, you can put them on top of each other, below each other, back and forth. One thing that's really important to know though is that if you have a clip on top of another clip, it is the clip above that is going to be seen in your program monitor. And when you export the video, that's what you're going to see as well. So again, I double click the clip and I see it in the source monitor. If I click and drag on the video without having any in and out points, I will drag down the entire clip. So let's do that. So here you have a little sequence of these girls in the car. If you want to delete a clip, for example, here in the middle where you have two duplicates, you click on it to highlight it and you click your delete button on your keyboard. You can also do the same if you have an empty space like this. You click on it and highlight it and click delete. All the clips after will then move up to meet your previous one. So let's have a look at the essential tools for editing. First one that we need to know is V. V is basically your selection tool, and it's also the standardized one that you get when you open Premiere. If you look on this bar to your left, here is that selection. V is the top one, selection tool. This tool allows you to click on a clip and move it around. The next one that we need to know is C. C stands for cut. When you press C, you get this little razor blade thing, and you can basically cut anywhere in the footage. If you then want to delete the second part, you go back to your V, you click on the footage that you want to delete, and click your delete button. And there you made a cut. Another thing you can do is also to prolong and shorten your footage. Say you have this short clip here of these two girls sitting in the car. If you hover your mouse on the edge of the clip, you see this little red bracketed arrow. You click here, so you highlight the edge of the clip. And that means that you can pull it longer or shorter. So in this example, I'm going to extend it all the way out to the way we had it before. An alternative to this is if you click B on your keyboard. You then get the same symbol, but it's yellow instead. So if you now click and drag, that means that all the other footage would come along with it. Like this. And it works both ways. It works if you extend your clip, everything moves up. And if you shorten your clip, everything moves with. So it's really helpful if you want to keep the same clips after each other and you don't want any unnecessary space in between them. The next tool that we're going to look at is Y. Y is a slip tool. You can find it here on the left-hand side as well. Basically, let's say we have these 3 clips in a row and you're really happy about the placement and the length of the clip. But in this middle clip, you're not really happy with the selection that you made. If you press Y, click and hold the clip, and then drag it either left or right, then you can select another section inside that clip. Just under the clip, you see a little plus sign, and then you see how many seconds and how many frames you have moved. In your program monitor, you see the first section of the clip and the last section of the clip that you're now selecting. So if I move this up here, and then I release, then we have chosen a new section of this clip here in the middle. Perfect. Another really, really helpful tool that I actually use a lot when I edit is A. A gives you 2 little arrows, and when you click down, you can highlight the footage that you select. With this, you can move all the footage in the timeline up and down. Be aware of that you only select the footage which is on the right side of the arrows. So if you click here, you only select these 2. If you click here, you only select that. This means that you can move everything up and down in one easy go. So these are obviously the shortcuts that Premiere already give you. But if you want to customize your own, you can go up to Premiere Pro, click Keyboard Shortcuts, and you can pick anything that you want for any shortcut that you want, right here. So Premiere has a lot of effects you can use, so feel free to just play around and try all of these out. We're going to have a look at a fade transition, which is called dip to black. So what you want to do is you click on a transition and you drag and drop it where you want it to be. So now we have a dip to black in the beginning of this clip. Let's have a look at it. So we add a dip to black in the beginning, and then we can add a dip to white somewhere in the middle here. Let's look back at it. So a dip to black or dip to white is a really, really easy and quick way to introduce your footage in a softer way. You can also put this in the end to have a little fade out sequence, or just to help a cut be less harsh, like this. So we have a small little edit, we have a couple of effects. What we want to do now is to add some text. I'll show you how to do it. So we go up to Window, we go to Workspaces, and we want to go to the tab called Captions and Graphics. Premiere is going to move around a little bit and show you the tabs that we need for this. The way you create a text layer is either you click this little T for type tool, or you press T on your keyboard. I'm going to do that now. And then you click on top of the footage here, and you get a little text bar. Worth noting is that you see down here in your timeline, graphic. This little section is basically where on your video that you will see the text. And this works just as a normal clip, so you can drag it out, make it longer, make it shorter, but I'm going to put it over the second and the third clip, so just here, not on the first. If we go back to our clip, we want to write something. Let's write vibes. And what we can do here on the right-hand side, where you see essential graphics, we can change this text and make it look however we want it to. We can center it. We can make it bigger. I'm going to center it again. We can change the font. And you have Adobe standard font library here, but you can also import your own, which can be really fun. So I'm going to do that. We can center, align the text here, and then center with the alignment here, and then we know it's always going to be in the middle. We can add a stroke if we want. Let's do it at size 2. And you can change the color. Let's do it in red. And then we can get rid of the fill. And all of a sudden, we have a text on our footage. If you've gone back to editing your timeline and you can't find where to edit your text, make sure you click on the text layer. And then up in the right-hand side, you should be able to see Essential Graphics. Another way to find the tab is also to click this little symbol up here. And here you can find all the workspaces. And right now, as you can see, we're in Captions and Graphics. You then want to click the specific text that you want to edit. And this one is obviously the Vibes one. So we have already gotten rid of our fill, which means that our text is now hollow. We have added a stroke. You can also add a background if you want. You can add a shadow. You can make the text cursive. You can basically play around and do a lot of different things here. There we go. Now we're done with our text. So let's say you're recording an interview, or maybe a setup like this. You have 1 camera and 2 cameras. How do you synchronize it? Let's have a look. So we're back in Premiere and we want to go to our raw footage. So we go into our raw footage folder. We find the 2 clips that we want to synchronize. This is a side angle and this is a front angle. So let's pull them into the timeline. What we want to do is that we want to put the 2 pieces of footage on top of each other. For this specific example, we also have an audio track. So let's pull that in as well. And it doesn't really matter where you put them in the timeline as long as they are on top of each other, meaning that they're on different tracks. So we have clip 1 on track 1, we have clip 2 on track 2, and then we have the separate audio on track 3. What we want to do is that we want to highlight all of these clips by dragging over them like this, right click, and then we want to click synchronize. We want to make sure that we have the audio tab highlighted, just because Premiere is going to listen to the audio in the clip, especially because we have a clapperboard, and it's going to be able to synchronize according to the clapperboard and also according to my voice. Let's press OK. And there we have it. Premiere has put all the pieces of footage in the right order. Now what we can do is that we can mute the audio clips that we don't like, which we can do by pressing this M button here, that one and that one. This means that we will only hear the green track down here, which is the external audio that we recorded. And we can choose to make some cuts in our video. I'm going to press plus to zoom in. I think this is where I'll start talking. You can see the high spike here of the clapperboard. And then I know that I'm starting to talk about here because you can see that the waveforms are really loud. Let's play it back. Hi guys, in this video from Hubhub, I'm going to show you how to synchronize your audio between 1 and 2 cameras. Let's get to it. There you have it. So the next thing that we're going to look at is color grading. Let's change up the color in this footage. So what we want to do is to press this little icon in the top right, your workspaces, and we want to go to color. And here we see a few different things. On your right hand side, you have your limit your color section. So what you can do is that you can color correct a single clip if you have it highlighted. But what I'm going to do is to create an adjustment layer so we can edit all the clips at one go. I'm going to go to my project tab. I'm actually going to create a new folder for this. I'm going to right click, new bin. I'm going to name this assets. I'm going to double click on assets. And here I want to create an adjustment layer. I want to right click, go go to New Item and click Adjustment Layer. And these settings are the same as the timeline already, so I'm just going to click OK. Adjustment layers are super good because you can put effects and color grading on top of them without actually doing something to the footage itself. Let's drag and drop this. We want to put it above everything else on track number 3. I want to extend it just as I do with a normal clip, and I want it to cover everything. But let's put the text layer above the adjustment layer because I don't want to adjust any of the colors in the text. I just want this to affect the footage. There we go. You can just drag and drop, and then you can pull them down so there's no space in between. Now let's click on the adjustment layer and start color grading. So if you look on the right hand side here, you have your basic correction tools. And here you can change things such as your temperature. You can make it colder or warmer, bring out those sunset vibes, make it pink, make it green, make it a bit spooky. We can also change the saturation and make it completely black and white, which I think looks quite cool. So let's keep that. We can bump up the contrast a little bit, bump up the highlights, make it a bit more brighter in the background. And there you go. Now you have a completely new look for your footage. Let's have a look at it. So there we have it. If you want to see the difference before the color grading and after the color grading, you can go down in your little sequence panel here and you can press the I. Basically what that does is just hide that entire track. So that's before and that's after. If you want to color correct a specific clip, what you can do instead is that you click on the clip like this, and then you go to the right here where you see the lumetri color, and then you see that the actual clip is selected instead. So we're going to do something else quite fun here. We're going to go down to Creative, and we're going to see if there's any fun looks we can use. Because Premiere has all of these presets, all of these looks that you can literally just click on and add to the footage. So let's see if there's one that we like. Let's do this one. So if you find one that you like, you just select it and click. That one was a little bit dark, so let's see if we can find another one here. And you can also adjust the intensity if you want it a little bit more or a little bit less. I'm going to select it there. And we can also add a little bit of faded film, make it look a bit vintage. The lumetri color panel has a lot more that you can dive into. We have our curves, color wheels, and a lot more. I'm not going to go into this in detail right now. Ask your teacher if you want to know more about all these features. So we're finished with our video and we like how it looks, but we also want to export this in a vertical format as well as a horizontal. Say we want to post this video on YouTube, but we want the same video for Instagram Reels. Let's look at how to do that. So we want to go back into our editing workspace and we want to find our project tab. We want to go to our sequence and we see the one that we're working in right now, the 1920 by 1080. So what we want to do is that we want to duplicate the sequence, right click, duplicate, and it creates an exact copy. We now want to make this into a Reels format, same as what we did with the previous sequence before. We right click, we go to sequence settings, and then we get this sequence setting window. So similar to what we did before, we want to change the aspect ratio. So instead of a vertical 1920 by 1080, we want to do 1080 by 1920 and make it Instagram ready. You press OK. And we get this little warning box again because the footage is not in the same aspect ratio as the sequence, but we're going to click OK anyway. And we're going to rename the sequence. Super important to keep track of that. 1080 x 1920 underscore reels. And there we go. And now we can see that because the sequence setting is different to how the footage is, the aspect ratio is different, we just want to change the size of the footage so that it fills the entire frame. A way we can do this is that we click on the footage, we go to this bar up here called Effect Controls, and we can scale it. So either you click here and add another number, like 200, or you can hold and drag to make sure it covers the entire frame. Do also make sure that your adjustment layer covers the entire screen, because as you can see now, you have my black and white adjustment layer in the middle, but we can see some colors popping out at the top and the bottom, and we do not want that. So make sure that the adjustment layer covers the entire image. And we want to do this for the rest of the footage as well. You click, you up the scale, the last one, click the footage, you go to effects control, and you make it bigger. There we go. You don't need to do anything with the actual effects. They will just automatically size up to your footage. Last but not least, we want to make the text a little bit bigger. We click the text layer. You can also change this here in the effects control panel. Make the scale it up a little bit. There we go. That looks good. Let's have a look at it. Now, let's start with exporting our first video. What you want to do before you export is that you want to select the section that you actually want to export from your timeline. You do this by marking in and out points. I'll go to the beginning of my timeline. I press I, and then I move my playhead to the end, and I press O. This means that if you have any other extra clips further out on the timeline, that those won't be exported as well. Just this section that you want to export. Make sure you have your sequence selected. You go up in the top right corner and you click export. Make sure that you have the media file switched on. The first thing that you're going to see is your file name. And the file name is always the same name as the sequence. So you have that there already. Hub 1920 by 1080 _ version 1. The second thing that you want to do is to find a proper location for your video clip. And because we already have a file structure that I showed you in the beginning, it's going to be easy to find a spot for it. We click here, we go to Redrum, editing file structure, we go to renders, and then we go to development. We select development because this is a version 1 of this clip. Maybe we're going to do version 2, maybe we're going to do version 3 and 4 and 5, we don't know. What we do know is to never ever name your clip final, because you never know if it's going to be the final one at all. So for this example, we're just going to stick to Premiere Pro's preset and their format. We're not going to touch this now, but I am going to describe this in a later video. We want to make sure that our range is source in and source out, which means that you will only export from the in point to the out point, which I selected before. And then what you do is press export. And voila, your video is exported. Now let's have a look at the Reels version. So same thing goes here. You want to pick your in point and you want to pick your out point. What you can do is that you can put your out point here instead. And that means you only export this section of the video and you skip this last part. So let's do that. You make sure that the sequence is highlighted. You click the export tab. And then because this is a Reels format, you want to go down to video. And you want to make sure that you click match source. This means that you will export this in a vertical version and not in a horizontal. You stick with the presets, you press export, and Bob's your uncle. You have exported your video. So that was it. Premiere Pro from A to Z. I hope you learned a bit today, and if you want to know anything else, just ask your lecturer. Happy editing!